This is In FinTech, the podcast for the global FinTech community, brought to you by EC1 Partners.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of In FinTech with EC1 Partners. I'm Jake Gottlieb, for those that don't know me. I'm Managing Director here for our European business. I've been with EC1 for 10 years, and actually this is my first time hosting our podcast. So a little bit nervous, but equally quite excited. Our guest today, I think, deserves quite a big introduction. I've known him for about 10 years, worked with him as both a client and a candidate. And actually I worked with his brother before I joined EC1 in a previous life, working in deliverable foreign exchange. So we know each other quite well. I'd consider him a bit of a friend. Hope he feels the same. But he is he's currently the Chief Revenue Officer of an exciting fintech payments company called 3S Money. He is an ex-international DJ as well, I may add. Could be argued as a part-time comedian as well, and definitely the best-dressed man in the city for sure. So I'd like to welcome Paul Arnold. Nice to see you, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
And you, mate. And you.
So look, I think maybe just a good place to start. Obviously, we've got a bit of an agenda, and I think the topic of this podcast, I think it really talks about you and your career, rather than going into detail about your business. And I hope that resonates with people. So once we get into the questions, it should be sort of free flowing. But just maybe to get this started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, who you are, just for any viewers that don't know you. I'm sure a few of them do.
Well, thanks for the nice introduction. I would consider you a friend, Jake. Yeah, we've known each other for some time. Hi, I'm Paul Arnold. As Jake said, I'm currently the CRO for a exciting fintech. I like the way you called it, exciting fintech, called 3S Money. I've been in the financial markets industry for the last 25 years. I think it's 25 years, something like that. Since I was about 24 years of age. I was born in the East End of London, but grew up in Surrey and Berkshire. One of the purposes of this whole topic is the fact about I didn't go to university. And so as a consequence of that, I grew up, I've had various different jobs and careers. One of those is being the international DJ that Jake's talking about, which was a part of my life until I was about 24 years of age. I then joined a startup company in the foreign exchange business called HiFX, which is where Jake and we didn't work together, did we? But we
No, I worked with your better brother, Spencer.
I'd agree with that. He is my better brother. We didn't actually work together. We worked for the same company. I worked there for about 10 years. I started in a very junior position. I worked my way up to being sales director, eventually running their US operation, the Canadian operation from a sales perspective. And I quit there in about 2008. I then joined Bloomberg. Had a little stint. I think you got me a job at. I think it was you that
Wall
got
Street
me a job,
Systems.
your boss.
Wall Street Systems.
Wall Street Systems. Yeah.
I won't take credit. It was Jamie.
It was Jamie Cole. Wall Street Systems, which is a treasury management system provider. I worked there for about a year, and then you got me a job at Bloomberg. So I owe a lot to my career to EC1. So there you go. But I worked at Bloomberg for 10 years, eventually ending my career there as the global European head of sales, or EMEA head of sales for their foreign exchange electronic trading product, FX Go. I did a stint. My previous role to this was at Euronext FX.
Where we also got you the job.
You also got me that job. Kind of. I won't go into why, but you kind of got me that job. But yeah, I was there for 3.5 years, and then I've now been at 3S Money for the last 5 months, actually. It feels like 10 years, but I've been there for the last 5 months. So, yeah, that's a brief history of my career. It feels like a lifetime, and it was a lifetime. So, yeah.
Nice. All right, well, look, I think, like I said earlier, that I guess the premise of this conversation is really to learn a little bit about you. I think there are students right now coming out of university. There are students coming out of school. People just trying to figure out their careers, what to do next. FinTech is obviously a pretty buoyant market right now. And I just want to really understand a little bit about your journey, how you've got to where you've got to. And I think the most appropriate first question is the fact that you didn't go to university. And given you didn't go, what challenge, if any, has that presented throughout your career in terms of not only working your way up through the corporate ladder, but also naturally competing with people that maybe did go to university? How did you find that?
What challenges? I don't know what you're talking about. No, of course, yeah. No, it's a very good question, really. And I think, I grew up in an era, obviously I was born in the 1970s, grew up went to school in the 1980s, and it was very different then, right? You didn't need a university degree to get in a position. It was more about attitude, hunger, those sort of things, and how you presented yourself more than it would be about your education status. I think the whole university thing for the last sort of for the last sort of 20 years, I suppose, has been, when you look at all the top banks in the city, they all require university degrees. I remember when I moved to the United States for HiFX, we wouldn't recruit people in the States unless they had a university degree, which I found a little bit off-putting considering I didn't have one. So I was sales director, giving a prerequisite to the recruitment consultants that we wanted only people that had a university bachelor's degree or whatever it would be, yet I didn't have one. I think the tides have turned a little bit recently, with the work of, putting more investment into people with apprenticeships and various other things, which I think is a good thing because, I'm not from a school of thought that thinks that having a university degree is the be all and end all. It's more about, attitudes, et cetera, et cetera. It has presented challenges. I'm not going to lie, it has. I would say the largest challenge has been my own self-challenge. I've worked in environments with very educated people, certainly at Bloomberg, certainly at Euronext, with very educated people that have been, academically very smart. Certainly now in the technology world, you've got a lot of academically smart people. And that has made me often, when I'm in those environments, feel like a little bit self-aware. Sometimes the imposter syndrome part comes in, where you're sitting in a room full of people that are very educated. They all sound like they know what they're talking about, and I've often had to really push myself to actually speak up and let my voice be heard. It has presented challenges, but I think working in certain environments, it's also presented a fresh set of eyes and a fresh set of ears, right? I remember at Bloomberg, when I was employed at Bloomberg, it was kind of they normally employ people with bachelor's degrees or degrees at least. I was one of their first. They didn't at my age, just because I had great experience in the FX world. But I remember them saying it was a bit of an experiment. But I was, I just walked straight in and I offered stuff. I work from a common sense approach, and sometimes the more educated people are, I think there's less common sense.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. You're probably right. But to be fair, you lasted 10 years at Bloomberg, right? You were a golden boy by the end of it. I did, yeah, and I obviously got promoted to a relatively senior role running EMEA sales. I think generally it has presented challenges, but in answer to your question, I think the challenges are more about me and not about it's my perception of how I come across, etc., not necessarily other people's perception. So that's the main challenge that I've faced. When it comes to not going to university. I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people in other industries will probably feel the same way. Imposter syndrome is a thing. I think a lot of people suffer from it, but I think you're maybe proof that it shouldn't deter you from entering a particular industry or a particular career if that's what you maybe if that's your passion or you think it could lead you to to having a good career in it, right?
I think so. I think, look, I just always go back to basics. And I think, things like hard work, attitude, enthusiasm, tenacity, work hard ethic, all of those things. If you're doing all those things right, then the educational piece is not, you can learn things, but you can't change attitude. Attitude is something you can't change. So I've always been a big believer that if I feel like I'm, certainly in Bloomberg, I just, when I felt like I was maybe less, what's the word? When I thought I knew less than everybody else in the room, I just worked twice as hard.
Yeah.
That's what I did, and I worked hard to learn those parts. I think everybody does suffer with imposter syndrome to some extent. I think the older I get, the less I'm inclined to think like that, just simply because, you look back at, I've had a 25-year career in the city. I must have done something right. I must be doing something right. So I think as you get older, a bit of experience. I dress well, that's it, and I'm a good chatter.
You need to be in sales, right? No, you're right. Look, I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm a little bit younger than you, but I think, I didn't go to university.
Only a little bit.
I went to university for a year, actually, had a very good time, but it didn't stop me from I think doing okay in my career. And I'm a salesperson like you, and I think actually when you look at sales as a career in every respect, it's about output, right? Yes, you need to be good at sales. You need to understand how to build rapport and build client relationships and so forth. But it is about output. To an extent, it is a numbers game. And if you're prepared to do more than the rest of the room, then you're more likely to be successful in sales. So I think that resonates. You mentioned Bloomberg. I just want to, and you mentioned learning as well. And that sort of is quite interesting for my next question. So obviously Bloomberg, for those that maybe don't know, they are renowned for being, an amazing company for graduates. They've got an unparalleled graduate program, even just an entry level, to the financial markets. So what did you learn during your time there that has now supported you, not only during, I guess, the 10 years at Bloomberg, but beyond that, in terms of becoming an accomplished salesperson and sales leader?
Good question. Actually, I joined Bloomberg. I don't know if you recall. I'm not sure if I was dealing with you, Jake, or it was directly with Jamie back then. I think it's probably Jamie. But yeah. I was interviewing for various different roles in the city when I came out of HIFX. It was just at the start of FX electronic trading, and it was and a couple of people I knew that were ex-HIFX that also left and worked for various FX trading platforms within the city. And it was either you or your boss, I can't remember, but he got me a role or got me an interview. I won't go into the name, but anyway, he got me an interview in the city, and it was for an FX electronic trading platform. And I met I think then he was the CEO maybe, or he was managing director or whatever, and we sat in a room and he basically walked through electronic FX to me in about 30 seconds. You do this, you do that, bish bash bosh, and go and sell it. You sound good to me, you've got a job. And it was back in those days where it was all done like that. And I came away from that. I knew nothing about electronic foreign exchange. I came from the voice broking world, a physical delivery voice broker from Windsor. And even though I had 10 years experience in quite senior positions in sales, I knew nothing about the electronic trading world. And I came away from that interview. I actually got given the job. They were like, you can start. But I came away from that interview really worried that I'd join that company and not know what I'm doing. There was no training program. It was just going to be sink or swim. And I was a bit worried about it. And funnily enough, then the role for Bloomberg came up. And I knew about Bloomberg University. I knew how great the training programs were. And it was that they were just starting an FX electronic trading platform themselves. And I was like, okay, this could be the opportunity. And even though I'd heard that Bloomberg was quite a tough, regimented place to work, and there's mixed reviews about what it's like to work there. I loved my experience at Bloomberg, but there are some, there are mixed reviews. I was more inclined to take that role because I felt that there was a supported training program for somebody like me that didn't know a lot about the electronic trading market, cross assets. I was an FX guy with a good sales ethic, but I didn't know all of this stuff. So, I joined Bloomberg, and I have to say it was an amazing experience in learning the whole electronic trading world. The things I learned about technology, about APIs, about connectivity, cross-asset learning, fixed income markets, equity markets, all of the things that I probably had, very zero exposure to through the HIFX years, I learned within the Bloomberg environment. And I think it gives you a really well-rounded education. I think Bloomberg also taught me, Bloomberg is renowned for changing things around. They like to just mix things up. So the head of sales becomes the head of product becomes the head of sales, and they just mix things up. And whilst I like that to some extent, because it just, it forces people to understand the different roles and see it from their perspective, it can be sometimes disruptive too. It's also the downfall of it in some extent, and one of the reasons why I left Bloomberg. But I think you need to, one of the key things I learned from Bloomberg, apart from all of the knowledge around asset classes and technology, etc., is to be adaptable, to be open to change, and be flexible. these are things that I think you need to be, technology changes, markets change, Bloomberg moves with the market, and you need to be adaptable and flexible. Otherwise, you get left behind. And I think that's, I think as I've got older, I think that's something in my career that I think that sticks with me from my time at Bloomberg.
At Bloomberg specifically, or equally anywhere else, was there training around sales process, how to be a good salesperson beyond just learning the product and learning the industry?
There was basics, we did used to do sort of various training programs for sales, but it was more about how to sell their products and more about product. They're a big believer, and rightly so to some extent, that we are Bloomberg, right? And we've got the best technology, and that everything is proprietary. Pretty much everything's proprietary that's been built internally. You don't see Bloomberg making massive acquisitions to integrate other technology. They build their own stuff. A lot of what they did in terms of training was more about the product, understanding the markets, but not necessarily about specific sales training, which, to be honest, Jake, was probably why I did pretty well there, because I only knew sales and I didn't know the product. But once I knew the product, then I could adapt myself to sell the product. So I don't think their actual sales training, as you want to call it, in techniques and that kind of stuff, was particularly good. But certainly letting you or giving you the tools to be able to understand their products and understand the markets that their products represent was very good.
Do you think that's actually, having spent 25 years in the market, HIFX, Wall Street, Bloomberg, Euronext, do you think that companies don't do enough in terms of actual just sales process type training?
It's funny, we're talking about this now. I just had a meeting yesterday with the CEO at 3S Money, and we talked about having a person to come. We're in a very large growth spurt. We want to be 3 times the revenue by the end of next year, which I think is achievable. And as a consequence, we're going to have to recruit lots of people. I know that's making you rub your hands together there.
This is recorded, so I quote you on that.
But yeah, we're in the process of wanting to recruit a lot of people, specifically in sales, and having a permanent training person. And the CEO did mention, do we want someone that can show training for sales techniques, etc. Yeah, I do think that more companies could do with more education around how sales, because sales techniques change, people change, markets change.
Yeah.
I think when I started, you came into the market at a similar time to me, where it was very sort of boiler room-esque selling.
Yeah.
You're kind of on the phones forcing it on people. Then it becomes much more consultative. Now it's a different type of sale. Nobody wants to be pushed. Everybody wants. So I think we do need to have ongoing, continual sales training in any environment. And I certainly think at 3S Money, as we grow the business, we're definitely going to look at ways to have training programs for our salespeople as we grow.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned earlier maybe some of the characteristics that I think you believe a good quality salesperson has. In your career, you've obviously worked with some talented people. I'm curious to know who is the most talented salesperson you've worked with or worked for. That's the first question. And then the second question would be why? What made that person a very strong salesperson in your opinion?
Yeah, good. There's a couple that spring to mind, but they're actually brothers. So one is, as you know him, Lawrence Butcher, who was the CEO and founder of HIFX. And the other is his brother, Daniel Butcher, who was also a founder of HIFX, but he was more on the trading dealing side.
I don't think I ever met Dan. I only met Lawrence.
Yeah, Dan's he came out of HIFX not early, but not before Lawrence and the guys sold it in 2013. What makes them good salespeople? Really good question. I mean, there's an element of pure belief. Lawrence was not only a salesperson. One of the reasons why I make him a good salesperson is because he sold us the idea of HIFX, and he sold. We were like the Pied Piper. He was like the Pied Piper, like the flute, and we all followed him. If he'd have said jump off a cliff, we'd have all jumped off a cliff. He was that leader, and that leadership role he played very well. But it was this. this sense of leading by example. Lawrence would always be the first in the office, the last out. He was, he would be, he was always willing to work twice as hard as everybody else. He didn't just, I think to become a good sales leader, you can't just be, barking orders a little bit. People need to know that they're confident that you could do that role as well as they can. And I know that it's probably a bit old fashioned way of looking at it now, but I certainly look at it that way, that I'd like to have confidence that that person can do the role and knows what he's talking about, right, or knows what she's talking about. I mean, I think it's that I think is something that I believe gives me confidence in a salesperson. Lawrence used to do a great thing, and that was he would never. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you use them in that order. And he would basically, in a position when we got into a client meeting, he would sit there and he would take notes and have a discussion with the client and talk to him. So you currently do this, you currently do that. How do you do that at the moment? Why do you do that at the moment? Lots of open questions. How, why, when, what, and then he would ask those open questions. And then with those open questions, present an argument back to the client very patiently, very consultatively. And I think that sales has kind of changed from that, but I love that approach. That just don't oversell, just sit back, have a conversation with someone, look at the gaps in what they're currently doing in their current environment, and then trying to fill those gaps. So I think from a sales perspective, I think somebody who's got that, I don't know, leading by example and self-belief in what they or what they sell. The belief in what they sell is something that I look for in a sales leader.
Yeah, no, I agree. I found Lawrence very credible as well, and I think if you've got a credible salesperson, they're always going to do.
It's probably where I go wrong.
You said it. No, okay. Look, that's great. That's really useful. So I want to kind of move into maybe how you've moved from the corporate world into now what is a scale up, right? Not sort of beyond the startup now. So I think I've been working for EC1 for 10 years. More recently, in the last few years, myself as well as some of my peers have been working with senior leaders in the space. And I think for any executive or leader working at a corporate company, you can get to a point where, you've got the golden handcuffs, it's well paid, low risk, but it can become quite mundane. I guess my question is, did you experience that? I suspect maybe you did. But how did you deal with that? And how did you keep yourself motivated at that time before, I guess, inevitably making the decision to leave?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly did. I think, you and I both know we had multiple conversations over the years about this sort of stuff. But it really came to light during the COVID period. I mean, I'm saying like it's over to some extent. It is over, but during that 2-year period of being at home, working from home alone, I live alone with no children or anything like that. So I was, in some cases lucky because I was working from home and I didn't have all the distractions. But it was also, not a great environment to be in, all day alone and then all night alone at home in my apartment. It was tough, and I did sort of sit there thinking, I think also on top of that, I got COVID and I was pretty ill, and I remember being at home for that period of time. When I got better, started thinking about things like, do I really want to be here? Is this what I really want to be doing? I felt like I wasn't reaching my potential, and it's really, it is tough, and I didn't necessarily. I had the golden handcuffs, I'm sitting there earning a good salary. I had a really good job. I like the people that I work with, but I just didn't feel I was reaching my potential. And I think, I started to realize, what is it that I actually want to do, rather than, what do I have to do? What would I like to do? And I know, as I said, if I'm passionate about a product, I'm really good at selling it. Right, if I'm really passionate about it. And so I wanted to find something that I was passionate about. I remember my years of HIFX, which I think was, my years of where I really sort of excelled in my career, and it's obviously gave me the platform to where I am now. I loved the product. I believed in it 100%, and I went out and sold it. And the same at FX go at Bloomberg, and to some extent when I started at Euronext. But I kind of felt I lost that a little bit, and I needed to find something passionate that I felt passionate about. And you and I had been speaking for some time about, maybe working for something where I would take a step back in terms of salary, etc. I was quite happy to do that. I was in a position to be able to do that, but for something that I was more passionate about. And that's when I started to look at fintech businesses, startup businesses, scale up businesses, and was lucky enough to come across 3S Money, which is where I am now. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that I went through those periods of worrying about that sort of stuff. But again, I just needed to go back to what I wanted to do, which is and feel passionate about something again. And that's the reason that I sort of decided that I wanted to start looking at making moves.
How have you found the transition?
It's tough. I'm not going to lie. They're a very young, they're a very ambitious company. They've got high targets. They want to achieve it. They've done incredibly well. But I'm an old man now. But when I was at HIFX, I was in my 20s. I'm now in my 40s. It's not as easy. So it's a lot of long hours. It's a lot of hard work. And people forget when it's a scale-up business, they don't have the infrastructure that Bloomberg, the IT infrastructure, the processes, all of that sort of stuff is not in place. So whilst you have ambitions here, you've got to build up the processes to get to those ambitions, and that's stuff that's really difficult to do. So I've loved it because it's so exciting and it's so fresh and it's new. But I'm not going to lie to you, Jake. It's hard work. It's really hard work, and long hours, lots of late nights. I've just come back from holiday, and throughout my whole holiday I was getting emails and I was working throughout the whole of it, which I'm not quite used to for the last few years. So it's been tough.
But I suppose, are you learning? Well, I'm sure you are learning, but are you enjoying that part of, I guess, the new job? Just the fact that it is new. I know you've obviously got some experience of payments, obviously certainly from your time at HIFX, but I think that's, for me, I've been at EC1 for 10 years, and I won't say that I haven't had moments where I've questioned, did I want to do something different, right? I actually think in 2015, I sort of had that moment after 3-4 years in the company, but I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to move abroad internally, which was great. But I think that, people play it over in their heads. Okay, what are the consequences of me moving? What are the benefits? What are the pros, the cons? And I think it's that learning. It's exciting because you want to learn, right? That's when inevitably you grow. But then at the same time, it's scary because you may be learning something new. So how have you found that part of it, learning something new? Is that really exciting for you?
Absolutely. I'm learning stuff every day. I mean, look, let's not make any bones about it. I've never been a CRO before, right? I've been in senior leadership positions in sales. I've held directorship roles. This is slightly different, and it's funny. I'm talking. Our CEO is a bit younger than me, far more ambitious. And I was talking to him the other day, and it was kind of like, I said to him, "I've never been a CRO before," and he looked at me and went, "I've never been a CEO before," right? So we're in that position, and all of us are learning as we go along. I think that's what makes it exciting, Jake. I mean, when it's stagnant and stale and you're not learning, that's when you're kind of sitting still, right? I mean, the whole purpose is you need to throw yourself into something, and I'm definitely learning stuff every day, and I'm having to. There's no internal resource to go and get answers. You've got to go and find them yourself, right? I mean, I'm going through a process at the moment with internally about something, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before, and there's no one internally I can speak to, so I'm having to go out to my contacts and how do I, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying that challenge, and I think principally that's what I wanted when I moved. Was I didn't feel I felt like I was not using all of my skill sets, or I was being underutilized. Not by them. Perhaps I just wasn't enthusiastic about it. But coming here, going to 3S Money. Yeah. It's definitely become something where I'm learning stuff every single day, and it's that I'm enjoying.
And what's the culture like? I'm sure working at Bloomberg, working at Euronext, an exchange, it must be very different now. How I mean, has that been enjoyed? I mean, you still look smart, you still look well dressed. I thought you'd be wearing a hoodie and maybe just a little bit more casual.
Well, I've learned something, Jack. You know, every day I come in with something different on. I mean, I remember joining there, so I came for the interview, and I kind of, I don't know, maybe that's the salesman in me, but when I went for the interviews and processes, I kind of went in. The first day I was kind of smart cash. The next day I was wearing a hoodie. I kind of mixed it up a little bit. The culture is very different. It's very different. And I think what they wanted with me is that they wanted to mix it up. So their culture is very much fintech. It's very much, yes, as you said, hoodies and Air Force Ones, and everybody's kind of really relaxed. But it's built a really, I think one of the things that I love about 3S Money is that culture. Not saying that it's a hoodies and Air Force One culture, but there's a very good bond there. They've got a really good team. And I think when you've got a good team of people around you, you can succeed at everything, right? If everybody, you know, enjoys each other's company, we work together, that's the catalyst for a really good environment and a good work environment. But it has been culturally very different. I come, you know, like you, I come from an environment where I think in my first job, it was, for every minute I was late, it was £1 a minute. Yeah. It was that draconian. You know, you get sent home if your shoes weren't shined on a Wednesday, or, you know, it was ridiculous sort of boiler room culture. It's not quite that at 3S Money. But we're trying to get into a position where we're a little bit more disciplined as we grow as a business. It has to become that way. But yeah, from a cultural perspective, it's very different. But I think one of the things that's made us as successful as we are now, we've become, you know, we're doing really good numbers at the moment, and we've had record months for the last 3-4 months, and continue to have amazing months, is that culture. And it's a very sort of can-do culture. Let's go out and do it. Why not? Let's focus on it and make it happen. And I really like that.
Good, cool. So I guess the last question would be: there are a lot of leaders in the fintech market, most likely working for some of the larger corporate firms, who have considered making a similar move, but maybe haven't had the courage yet to do it. So what would your advice be to them in terms of taking the leap?
Don't do it. Stay where you are. What would my advice be? It's a good question. I think we've talked about this as well. I don't know. During that COVID period, I realised myself that life is too short, right? I mean, I lost some friends in that period. I realised that life is too short to be worried about the silly things, you know, the golden handcuffs, that kind of stuff. You know, I know I'm perhaps in a more fortunate position because I don't have, you know, a family and children and stuff that I have to support. So it's a little bit more fortunate. So I don't want to make it out to be that's not important, and some people can't just pick up and start something new. But I do think that I know I work, and I'm sure you do too, work very long hours. I spend a lot of time in the office. And I want to work in an environment where I really enjoy it and enjoy the people that I work. I love the culture. I love the products. I love that sort of stuff. And so I think what you need to do is have a really good look at yourself and say to yourself, you know, am I enjoying this? Is this something that I really want to do? Am I enjoying this? You know, do I still believe in the product? Do I still believe in what I'm doing? And if the answer to that is no, which is where I kind of was, then I think you need to perhaps make a change, because, you know, really life is too short to be, you know, to spend the 13 hours a day or 14 hours a day, 5 days a week, and in this current role at the weekends, doing something you're not really enjoying or not having any enjoyment out of. So, you know, I feel bad in saying that, because I know it's a lot easier said than done, but that's kind of where I got to during the COVID period. I kind of got to that period where I was just like, do you know what? I'm not enjoying this. Yeah. And I think it's time for me to make a bold move and make a step and get out of it. And, you know, it is a risk. I didn't know that I was going to enjoy 3S Money. You know, it's a risk. But hey, you know, hopefully I've only been there 5 months myself. It's paid off. Yeah. But, you know, I think, yeah, ultimately I just wanted to do something that I believed in, I was passionate about, and I want to enjoy. And that's the reason that I made the move. And I hope that, you know, other people, if that's the way they feel, that they should make the move too.
Yeah. Well, look, I think COVID was certainly the catalyst for a lot of people. I mean, You read articles about the Great Resignation, people leaving their corporate jobs for something, I don't know, more flexible, more hybrid, or just doing something completely different. I've heard loads of stories, but look, I'm really pleased that it's going well for you. Love the fact that you're about to hire 40 salespeople. I'm sure when this gets posted on LinkedIn, you're going to be inundated with messages from other recruiters.
I've got a meeting with a recruiter after this one. A decent recruiter.
But no, I really appreciate you taking the time. I was quite nervous given it was my first podcast. I said to you before that I was sort of practicing in front of the mirror this morning. My 1-year-old was looking at me, just giving me the thumbs up. So I thought that was maybe a good sign. But look, it's great to talk, and look, I hope the content itself, will just hopefully resonate with people, maybe in a similar position who are maybe thinking about making a similar move as well. So appreciate the time.
No problem. I've appreciated it too, and I hope it resonates with people as well. So thank you very much.
Cheers, Paul. Take care.
You've been listening to In FinTech by EC1 Partners. Find us at www.ec1partners.com or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter or Facebook.